Hello everyone. For this video, we will continue with our project evaluation methods. And for this video, we will focus on how we can evaluate the profitability of a project or an alternative. So at the end of this lecture, you should be able to use the net present worth method to evaluate the acceptability of a project or an investment. Secondly, to use the rate of return method, specifically the IRR method, to evaluate the acceptability of a project or an investment. And then thirdly, we will also explore alternative methods that you can use to determine the acceptability of a project by evaluating its profitability. Let's head straight to it. So with the present worth method, to put it simply, we just need to get the net present worth of all the cash flows occurring in a project. So what we need to do to get the net present worth is to bring the entire cash flow to year zero using an interest rate equal to MARR. So I'm confident that from the previous lesson, you learned how to move cash flows through time. So when getting the net present worth, what we need to do is to bring all the cash flows to year zero using an interest rate equal to MARR. How do we know if the project is acceptable? If the net present worth is positive, then the project is acceptable. If it's negative, then the project is not acceptable. And if it's zero, then we should be ambivalent of the project. So whether it proceeds or not doesn't matter. All right. Note that it doesn't tell us that the project is not profitable. It's just that so if NPW or the net present worth is positive, it tells us that we're hitting the minimum returns that we want. Okay. This is better illustrated with an example. Also, during an audit, you found out that an equipment in your manufacturing plant is scheduled for preventive maintenance. The cost of checkup and overhaul is estimated to be 50,000 pesos. If we do so, we are expected to increase our machine efficiency by 8%, which results in an additional annual income of 15,000 over the next 5 years. If the firm's MERR or our company's MERR is 10%, should we proceed or postpone the maintenance operation? To help you, I've written the formulas here. Let's begin. We should always start with the cash flow diagram. So on year zero, at year zero, we have a cash flow equal to 50,000 pesos. And over the next 5 years, we're getting cash flows equal to 15,000 pesos, right? So that's an annuity that runs from year 1 to year 5. Now, given formulas here equate F and A and F and P. F is a future value, A is annuity, P is present value. If we wish to get the present worth of an annuity, then what we need to do is to equate the right-hand sides of these two equations and then isolate the variable that we're interested in getting. So let's do that. So the net present worth, let me just annotate this slide. The net present worth of this cash flow is equal to, so we have negative 50,000. So we need to move that anymore because that's already at present. All right. Plus, we need to get the present equivalent of these 5 annuities. So note that while we can move that individually, we also learned in our previous lesson how to calculate the present equivalent of an annuity. So basically, as I mentioned, we just need to equate the two equations shown on top of the screen and then isolate P because what we want is the equivalent value at year P, year zero rather. So it will then be equal to the annuity value, which is 15,000 times 1 plus I raised to the n. So I here is 10%. So note, don't be confused between the 8% and the 10%. What we'll be using is the 10% because that's the MARR. So let me just write the second part of the equation. So it's 15,000 times 1.1 raised to the 5, that's n, minus 1. And then we need to divide that. We need to divide that by 1 by I times 1 plus I to the n. So 0.1 times 1.1 raised to the n. You can get your calculators and let's compute for that value. All right, so I'll give you a few seconds to do that. A minute siguro. Okay, so that gives us a net present value of 6,861 and 80 cents. So this gives us a positive net present worth. So therefore, what do we conclude from that? Therefore, the project is acceptable. So we should we should push through with the maintenance. All right. Okay, so if this is clear, then we can proceed to the next slide. The present worth has other variations. So in addition to bringing everything to year 0, what we can do is to bring everything or to convert everything to an annuity. So that works as well. So it's the annual worth method. What we do is we convert the entire cash flow in terms of its uniform equivalent value. So convert the entire cash flow such that it's just an annuity, and we can easily do that as well using, again, interest rate equal to MARR. This is called the equivalent uniform annual cash flow. And again, if the EUAC is positive, then the project is acceptable. If the EUAC is negative, then the project is not acceptable. And also, essentially, you can bring the cash flow not only to the present, but to any point in time. Now, if we can bring it, if we convert it to an annuity that's workable, if we want to bring everything to year 3, we just need to make sure that the net cash flow at year 3 or year 4 or year 5 or any given year is positive. All right, so the answer to this is yes. We can analyze the entire cash flow by moving to any point in time and evaluating whether or not the net cash flow is positive. All right. Now, the next set of next method we will learn for the evaluation of projects is called the internal rate of return method, or the IRR method. So the IRR is the actual rate by which a project or an investment earns. Also, this is different from the MERR in the sense that the MERR is what we want to earn, right? What we want to earn, while the internal rate of return is what the project actually earns, considering what you invest and what you gain for your cash flows. So the IRR of the investment or a project is computed using equivalence formula as well. So we need to do, para malaman natin yung IRR, is we just need to equate the cash flow to 0 and then calculate for I, and that will be the project's IRR. If the IRR is greater than the MARR, ang ibig sabihin na no, the actual or the internal rate of return of the project is greater than what we want to earn, which is the MARR, then the project is acceptable. Otherwise, the project would not be acceptable. Again, it is best to use an example. So let's start. So we'll use the same example so that we can compare across the two different methods. No? So 50,000 pesos investment cost, 15,000 pesos expected increase in the profit every year. So that's cash inflow that we expect as a consequence of the 50,000 investment. The firm, the MAR of the firm is 10,000 pesos. And these are the formulas. And then 50,000 sa cash flow natin, and then we have 15,000 annuity. Now, how do we calculate? Sabi natin, the IRR is essentially the actual rate of return of the project. So that is derived by equating or setting the equivalent of the cash flow to zero. So let's do that. Pwede nating dalhin lahat sa year zero. Oops, sorry about that. Pwede natin dalhin lahat sila sa year zero. Then, sabi natin 15,000. So don't forget the negative here kasi a cash outflow siya. So 15,000, again, we need to multiply it by 1 plus I raised to the 5. Take note na hindi natin gagamitin si MAR kasi nga what we want to solve here is the I, no, that will make the equation equal to 0. Minus 1. And then we divide everything, but not everything, but we divide this term here by I again times 1 plus I raised to the 5. And we need to equate that to 0 kasi nga gusto natin makuha yung I that will make this cash flow have a 0 net present worth. So that will be your internal rate of return. So I know ang calculate natin dito is the internal rate of return. So don't worry about this. No, your calculator can actually solve for the root of this equation. So I hope nagamit nyo na before. Let's try. So we start with the negative 50,000 plus 15,000 times 1 plus, usually ginagamit natin is x. No? So kung hindi niya pa nagamit before, that's your homework to try and figure how to use your calculator to solve for roots of equations like this. You'll notice na may I to the 5 ka dyan, so that will give you an equation of fifth degree. No? So kailangan magkakaroon ka ng 5 roots. So kailangan din yung initial na iteration natin would be a number that is sensible para hindi masyadong matagal yung iteration ng calculator natin. So ang gagamitin natin dito, I'm sure you've heard of it, the shift solve function. Shift solve function. So shift solve. Tapos pag nag-solve tayo, dapat medyo sensible na percentage. So a value between 0 and 1 is the most sensible value to assume. I'll probably use 0.1 as the starting number. Kapag nag-iterate siya, nandun lang malapit, no, yung value na makukuha natin. And what I get here is an I, which is actually what we want for the IRR, which is equal to 15.24%. I hope we all got the same number. No? So what do we do with this IRR? We need to compare it with the MARR. So is 15.24% greater than your MARR, which is equal to 10%? So the answer is yes. So therefore, the project is acceptable. All right. I'd like to point out that the method we discussed earlier, and this method always yields consistent results. So parehas sila. It's basically working with the same equation and with the same principle, just two different approaches. All right. Also, either you go by the IRR method or the net present worth method, you should arrive at the same conclusion on the project's acceptability. All right. So thank you very much for listening. I'm leaving you with some examples to work on. So to practice on. So this one is just a bit more challenging. We added a salvage value at the end. Salvage value is basically an amount that we're able to recover at the end of the useful life of a project or an investment. So yeah, and then another example using LED lights and prospective savings, analyzing for 5 years. Yeah, so this should be easy as well. Use the different approaches that we learned in this video. All right, so thank you for listening and I hope you learned a lot. Bye-bye.